Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Amy casts a clone. Nick responds by casting a Purelace to make the clone spell white. As clone enters the battlefield, Amy chooses to have it become a copy of Forerunner of Slaughter. What color is clone now? Alright, so once the clone enters the battlefield, there are going to be several continuous effects acting on it that change its color. The first one that applies is the copy effect, which causes the clone to gain the copyable values of Forerunner of Slaughter. This includes its mana cost, so at this point clone will be red and black. Next, color changing effects are applied. We have two to consider here. Devoid wants to make this creature colorless, but the Purelace that was cast earlier wants to make it white. Even though the Purelace was played against the clone's spell on the stack, an effect that changes the color of a permanent spell on the stack continues to apply to the permanent that spell becomes. So now we have to evaluate which continuous effect applies first. You might think that it should be Purelace's because that has an earlier timestamp. However, Devoid is a characteristic defining ability, and within each layer, continuous effects from characteristic defining abilities are applied first, and then other types of continuous effects are applied afterwards. I talked about this in my video about Painter's Servant and Mycosynth Lattice. This means clone will start out as blue, then become black-red, and then colorless, before finally ending up as a white permanent. Pretty cool, right? Well, I guess. But to me it seems like there's something missing. Ever since I wrote this question years ago, it bothered me that there was no way to make the clone green. So let's say Amy did not clone a Forerunner of Slaughter directly. Maybe she's having the clone enter as a copy of the token this Croaking Counterpart made when it was played targeting a Forerunner. What would clone's color be then? Well, we'll proceed as before, but with an extra step at the beginning. We need to determine the copyable values of the permanent clone is copying before we can say how that process will affect clone. If you've been a fan of the channel for a while now, you might remember that copy effects do not copy other types of continuous effects acting on the thing that's being copied. But if we read Croaking Counterpart very closely, we can see that being a 1/1 green frog is a modification to the copying process. This means that those values are part of the copyable information the clone sees. Be sure to read very carefully when applying this rule because some cards have a copy effect and then add extra stuff onto the thing that's being copied after that, which in that case, the extra stuff would not be part of the copyable information. I talked about this in detail in my video on Hoffrey Ghostforge and Divine Visitation. So anyway, like I said before, the way that Croaking Counterpart is worded, being a 1/1 green frog is indeed part of the token's copyable information. In layer 1, therefore, the clone will acquire those values and look like this. Hey, wait a minute, where's the Devoid? And to answer that question, we'll need to take a look at the token Croaking Counterpart made. We can see that Devoid is not on this creature either. Now the reason why is unfortunately related to exactly what we were trying to do. See, if a modification or exception to the copying process specifies a set of values for a certain characteristic, any characteristic defining ability on the thing that's being copied that defines that characteristic will not be copied. Now, if that sounded a little too technical, let's apply it to the concrete situation that we're considering here. This rule means that because Croaking Counterpart says the token is green, any CDA that sets color will not be copied. Forerunner of Slaughter does not have any color indicators nor any CDAs that affect its power, toughness, or creature types, but if it did, those also would not be copied either. I talked about this in my video about Croaking Counterpart and Tarmogoyf. So yes, this kind of trivializes the rest of the question. Clone will be a copy of this creature, and after applying Purelace, it will be white, just like we had in the previous example. I guess it is kind of interesting to think about how if we took the Purelace out of the equation, the clone would be green, even though its mana cost is black and red, since the copyable values are derived from the original object's printed values as modified by copy effects acting on the original. But my search for the perfect chromatic rules question that makes a single object pass through being every color and also colorless has to continue. If you'd like to join this noble quest, I'll mention there are additional artistic merit points available if you can incorporate the 2 additional ways a card's color can change, which I left out from my original question: text changing effects and color indicators. That's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.